let's do a quick recap of what we saw this season before we turn our attention to DFS for the final week. But who or what would you say was the biggest surprise in fantasy football in 2016?
Well, guys, I think there's two ways to look at it. Positive surprises and negative surprises. And I guess we can start with the negatives. Todd Gurley,
Yeah.
I think that was probably the biggest one. It's been pretty impressive to see. Some people in one of our office leagues here. The guy who took one of them had Todd Gurley and took him number one. So if you manage to make it through a season and win your league or get close to winning your league after essentially wasting your number one or number two overall pick on Todd Gurley, who just never quite got it going. I think that was one of the bigger surprises of the season. As we got to week 6 or 7, you're still waiting for that big game. And obviously now as we go into the 17th week, I should say, of the season, we still haven't gotten it, and it just doesn't look like he's quite the same guy. In the same vein, Allen Robinson, a guy who was drafted in the first round in a lot of leagues. Obviously, the Jaguars' offense struggled as a whole, but him really not being able to get separation and make those big plays, and of course, Blake Bortles and taking a step back as a quarterback was certainly an issue for fantasy owners. On the positive side, I was impressed by what I saw from both of the Packers receivers. Jordy Nelson right now, number one in scoring in ESPN fantasy formats. Devontae Adams, number 8. This time last year, a lot of people were calling for the head of Devontae Adams. They didn't think he was going to be in the Packers' future. They thought that they had made a big time mistake taking him as high as they did. But now he looks like a really good receiver. Of course, he still has his issues with drops. But both Packers receivers becoming top 8 overall fantasy commodities, I think, was a really positive surprise.
Nick, I think there's a few ways you could go with this next one. Who was your fantasy MVP of the 2016 season?
For me, it's David Johnson. Aaron Rodgers is number 1 overall in scoring, but that's not all that surprising. I think Johnson really established himself as the number 1 unquestioned fantasy running back. 77 receptions, 841 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns through the air. That's what makes him so valuable. You could argue maybe Le'Veon Bell is right there in terms of talent and what they do on the ground, but no one really provides what David Johnson does as a pass catcher, and he's certainly not bad as a pure running back as well. So I think what he does through the air was so valuable this season. Even on days when he didn't have huge rushing performances, he was pretty much guaranteed to give you 3, 4, 5 catches for 40 or 50 yards, and that really raised his floor week to week.
We saw Michael Beller, our 120 Sports and Sports Illustrated fantasy writer, also went with David Johnson over Aaron Rodgers, and almost for the same reasons that you gave us there, Nick. So, David Johnson had an outstanding season and has the chance to be a double-digit fantasy performer for all 16 weeks of the NFL season, something we haven't seen since Emmitt Smith.